We got a lot to cover. I did schedule this for 90 minutes. I hope we don't take your whole afternoon, but we'll try and get through as quickly as we can. We want to cover some of the topics that were presented at Build this last year. Microsoft Build was held at the end of March, 1st of April, and several of us went to San Francisco to be part of that. And we want to bring back a report and let you guys know what you may have missed. All of the sessions are available on channel9.msdn.com. You can go to that first URL and then search for events, Build 2016. You'll get the second URL. On that, if you click on either one of the two links below it, on the page at the top is the keynote for day one, and keynote for day two. There was no keynote for day three. I'm going to quickly try and cover some stuff that was talked about in the keynotes, and then you'll get to some of the people that will present today. We'll talk about different sessions that they attended that they would recommend that you attend or watch later. If you go out and look at the keynote, if you click on that keynote day one list link, it will have the video player at the top, and then underneath it, it has an offset index for whatever you might be interested in. So you can just click on the time index, and it'll jump you right to that part. So you don't have to watch the whole 3 hours if you only are interested in one little piece. But that's a little small for you to read. So I kind of took a summary and scanned it down a little bit. So here's some of the things of day one. Big thing that Satya Nadella presented, which is what Microsoft has been kind of touting for quite a little while now, is that they want to make sure that they're thinking of in priority order, mobile first, cloud first, before desktop, before other things that may have been their priorities in the past. So this is the direction that Microsoft is going. So everything that they do and everything that comes out, every announcement should follow into that overall priority. They talked about Windows 10, the success of that. They talked about Cortana and some things that were existing. Then they got into some cool new stuff. Ink is a thing that's not super brand new, but some of the things that they've been adding to it makes it so that you can draw. You've been able to do it in Edge now for quite a little while, but you can now draw and add the Ink APIs into your application. So Tony and I were talking about with a Gospel Library for Windows, which Tony and I both work on as a side project outside of work. That people have been asking, can I write in the margins of my digital scriptures like I can with my real scriptures? And with Ink, they will be able to. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen in our first release of Gospel Library for Windows 10, which we're working on right now. So, but it will come. And then there's a cool ruler that you can drag around with touch. You can move it with 2 fingers and spin it and turn it, and things will line up along the ruler. That was pretty cool. Universal Windows App Platform, they talked a lot about that, so that you write your code once and it will run on all Windows 10 devices, regardless of how small, Raspberry Pi, all the way up to Xbox, to HoloLens, to Surface Hub, and so forth. Visual Studio 2015 they talked about Update 2, with a bunch of bug fixes in there. That's been released. If you don't have that, I would really recommend that you get Update 2 to Visual Studio 2015. If you're still on Visual Studio 2010, you need to kind of move back to the future with us and move forward. So Todd will have a presentation on that. Visual Studio vNext, which is version 15, and I know 2015 is a bigger number than 15, but for some reason they're going to go in a weird order. I don't know what they're going to. Maybe they'll come out with, call it 2016 or 17, depending on when it actually comes out. But anyway, what's that?
We'll call it 1 again, like
yeah, Core 1.0. They'll start over again with the numbering. Anyway, Alan has a presentation on that. There's an anniversary update for the anniversary of Windows that came out last August. Windows 10 came out with its initial release, public view for everybody, general release, and they're gonna have a year from that date, they'll have an update that'll have some major new functionality and features. They've been doing updates all throughout, and if you're on the fast track or the slower track on the Insider program, you can get new releases of Windows 10. Not all of them are as stable as others, so you have to deal with that. But if you want to wait till the next big release update of Windows 10, it'll be released in August, but the preview is out now if you want to play with it. They announced Bash on Windows. Tom's going to do his presentation on that, so you'll hear more about that later. They talked a lot about Xamarin, a little bit on day one, more on day two. They talked about Xbox. You can put your Xbox in dev mode and then write games in Visual Studio and deploy to your Xbox, and that's kind of cool. I talked about DirectX 10, some demos on that, some cool games. A lot about HoloLens at this build conference, so that's one thing you missed out on if you didn't attend. They talked about conversation as a platform, more on that on day two. And then they showed some cool bots with Cortana and Skype, and Rich is going to do building a bot here as a demo later, which is pretty cool. And then cognitive services, and we'll talk a little bit more about that next day. So here's day 2, the full scan. Here's the summary that I'm going to not take any more time on. Big day was about Azure. When they announced Xamarin, they said that they worked out all the legal, all the finance stuff, and Microsoft bought Xamarin, and now they're making the free license available to anybody who has Visual Studio, including the free Visual Studio Community Edition. So if you have free Visual Studio, you get Xamarin for free. You can now develop in Visual Studio for Windows, for iOS, for Android, and you can deploy across all platforms in the mobile environment. Then there was a lot of stuff about IoT. Gordon's going to get into that, Gordon Young. And then more on Azure stuff, just a lot of different services. Microsoft Azure's trying to have everything that AWS has, that Amazon has in their web services. So you'll see more and more announcements coming out until Microsoft catches up. And by then, Amazon will go farther, so Microsoft will have to do beyond that, and back and forth. About Power BI embedded, that was pretty cool if you want to look at that in the keynote. A lot of stuff on Office 365 APIs. They're putting a lot of emphasis in that platform. They found that there was an SDK, an API, REST APIs for Exchange, a different one for SharePoint, a different one for Azure Active Directory, identity for Office. And so they combined them all into one set of REST APIs, and that's called Microsoft Graph. So you can write to one location and get to all those other services. Again, they talked about conversations as a platform with Office 365, so you can have these chats, and you have that ability to add that functionality to your app, or you have the ability to add your app into Office 365 applications as a ribbon button at the top. They also talked about connectors, bringing in a lot of data and a lot of different services, third-party services, into this common platform that people can share information and collaborate. Last, they mentioned the storage as a platform, or as Shu made a mistake and called it platform as a storage. Same thing. And lastly, they had Googs had some cool stuff that he was showing about how to take a lot of the wrapping up a lot of the different technologies and pull it into a common applications that take advantage of, say, Unity, HoloLens, and UWP. Or they had some students that did some cool stuff using the UWP stuff, and they were able to get it launched up into the space shuttle. So that was or space station. So that was kind of cool. All right, so that's it for me. We're going to turn it over to, I believe, Todd. No, who's after me? Is that right? Yeah. Okay, so we'll just go through. I can't remember the order now, but they'll just come up and introduce themselves.
All right, my name is Todd Pickering. I am .NET developer on Finance and Legal. The session that I attended that I'm going to be speaking on was called Debugging Tips and Trips for .NET Developers with Visual Studio. And the presenter was Casey Anderson, and she had created a WPF project to kind of go through her demo, so I did the same. Much simpler though, because I only have a couple minutes and she had an hour.
You have to go to the extracted version.
Oh, did I do the zip file? So the first thing she did is she just created a quick, I'll just launch this this project, and it's just you'll see it's a simple page with a button on it, and it says hello and then a conference title, and the idea is we're going to put hello build 2016 in this example, and we're going to use command line arguments to do this. So we're going to right click on the project and we'll go to properties. If you go to the debug tab, you'll see we have command line arguments right here. I'm going to go ahead and type in conference, and we'll say build 2016. So now when we run this project, it should take this build 2016 and put it in the project, so it'll say hello build 2016. So I'll go ahead and run the project again. And we see it says hello conference. So we find, so there's a bug here, so we need to jump into here and find out what's going on. So at this point, we could jump in and find where the entry point is for this and set a breakpoint. However, if you didn't know, you can go debug, or you can, go debug here. Let's see, am I in debug mode? And you can actually do step into or step over, and that'll actually take you right into the entry point of your project, and it'll stop you right at that point. So we're at the entry point of our project, so I'll go ahead and start debugging down to our part. You'll see the label headers right here, and we're using 3 functions here to get this string. And so let's go ahead and look at what each one of these is returning. So if we go to the locals window, we can see get greeting is returning hello, get conference turning /conference, and the get punctuation is returning the exclamation. We see our bug is right here in the /get conference. So I know this is the function right here that's giving me the issue. So I could also continue out, set a breakpoint, rerun it again, or I can also just click the arrow right here and step it back to where I want to go. You can also right click and do set next statement. That'll also take you there. So now that I'm at the line I want to be at, you'll see that the memory hasn't changed, so we still have the same items we had before. Now I want to get to this get conference here. If I just started F10ing into this, it'd take me to get greeting first, and I have to step through there, and then it would take me to get conference. However, if I just right click on this line, I can go to step into specific, and it'll actually show me everything in that line that I can jump into. So I know I want to go right into the get conference, so that'll take me right past everything else and put me right into where I want to be. So I'm going to go down here. This is where I know this is what it's going to return conf. So here's where our issue is going to be found. So I can F10 down into here. I can also just click where I want to go and right click and do a run to cursor, and that'll actually take me right to where I want to go. So that's a quick way you can get places without having to F10 through everything. So now that I'm here, I'm going to go to the arguments here. I'm going to look at what my values are here. I see the first item in here is the conference, and that's the value we're getting. And we actually want to get this build. So I actually want to change this X right here. And notice I'm still in debug mode. I'm just going to add this +1. And so this is a continue and edit and continue feature that they have. So you can just edit that right there. And I'll go ahead and save it. And now when I continue, which is a hello build 2016. So the next and last demo I'm going to do is this load data button. So I'll go ahead and just click this button here. You'll notice it came in here. I didn't have a breakpoint set, but it actually broke. And so it's actually a feature called debugger.break, and it's inside of a debugger.isAttached. So you could set these through your code if you wanted to, or it's going to break every time it hits there if you're in debug mode. So now here I'm going to go to this apps. You can see it's just getting apps here. There's 50 of them. I'm going to inspect this a little bit. If I do this, and notice I can't really get anything from this view. So I'm going to use something called debugger display. Any of you guys used debugger display before? It's a pretty nice feature. It's already around. So I need to set this up at the class level. So I'm going to go here. I could F12 to this and go to the definition of this, but I could also do if I do an Alt F12, it'll actually open up a peek window here, and it'll take me right there. So I'm not taking to another file, wherever that may be. And I can also edit this. So I'm going to uncomment this section. So it's debugger display. You have a string here, is the string you want it to say, and then whatever value you want that to show. So I'm going to go ahead and continue, save that. And this purple line here means I need to recompile for this to take effect. So I'll go ahead and restart this. And I'll load data again. It'll break again at my debugger. I don't need this anymore, so I'll just close this peek window. And I'll go ahead and inspect my apps now. And if I do that, now I can see the string and then the value I wanted there. So at this point, I'm going to go down further and set a breakpoint right here. And I'm going to continue down here, and I'm going to start iterating through my apps there that I have. And I want to view my language here. So I'm going to start just kind of stepping through this, and I'll notice it's Spanish here, and it's English. I can see it's changing. But if I wanted to debug and go through this, it's kind of a pain to keep doing this. So I can do my watch window, or I can actually come here and click this little pin button, and that'll pin my results right there. And I can click that and drag that around anywhere I want. So now as I step through this, I can see it changing right there. And I can also add some additional expressions there as well. So I'll go ahead and add the app ID there as well. So I can see as many values as I want on this little pin tool, and as I go through it, it'll be right there. Last thing, if you come over here and hover over the breakpoint, you'll see a little gears tool here. If you click on that, you can actually do some conditionals for your breakpoints. And so if I'm debugging this and I know I'm having an issue once this app ID gets up around 40, I'd have to step through this 40 times to finally get there. Or I can go ahead and set this condition, and I can say conditional expression is true. I'll go ahead and say where app.appID, I'll say greater than 40. So this tells the debugger to don't break this until this condition is true. So if I continue this, instead of going to 10, it should take me all the way up to 40, so I wouldn't have to go through those one by one. And so then it stopped me now, broke me at the 41 position. So that's my time. I'd highly recommend going to Channel 9 and viewing this. Again, it's called Debugging Tips and Tricks for .NET Developers with Visual Studio. There's another one I think someone's going to present on, but I don't think they are going to now. It's called Power User. I think become a Visual Studio Power User, I think is what it's called. That's also a really good one. It has a lot of this stuff as well as some more details on some other items. So, thank you.
Okay, my name's Alan Pearson. I'm going to kind of summarize some of the things that was presented in a talk by Uni Ravindranathan, something like that, entitled Building Desktop Apps in Visual Studio vNext. And vNext is kind of interesting. That's just the next version of Visual Studio, which they're calling, like we discussed before, is Visual Studio 15, not to be confused with 2015. Right now, it's currently statused in a preview mode, and what's kind of blocked me is that to get all the features, you have to have a preview version of Windows 10 as well. So I couldn't install it on my work computer because I just have the standard desktop, and it wouldn't let me do that. Well, kind of an interesting thing right now with the Visual Studio 15 is it has two installers. The first installer is the normal installer that takes 45 minutes to an hour and a half to run. But they have a new installer that's also designed using the new Windows 10 UWP style, which is really cool because it they uses AppX. .AppX is their extension. That's a file format for the installer, and AppXs are really cool because everything that you need is inside the AppX package, and when you install it, nothing gets put into registries or scattered around in the GAC or anything like that. So it's really just a matter of copying over the files. And they liked this feature so well that two different presenters showed how fast it was to install Visual Studio 15 by installing it at the beginning of their presentations, and it only took like a minute and a half to install Visual Studio, which is pretty unbelievable. The next thing, this is a slide taken from the course, is that they've upgraded Visual Studio to have all the new features of all the new stuff that's coming out. You know, the .NET Core that we talked about, and the different tooling that they have, and they say they have fixed over 600 bugs, which is pretty cool. For those of you who are interested in porting some older code, they have extended support for all the C++ libraries, from the standard libraries and the IDEs, and you can compile against the standard libraries, and you can even compile Android and iOS right within Visual Studio. A couple of just minor changes that they added to Visual Studio 15 is there's kind of one of those style wars whether you should use var or explicit types, and so your suggestions in your editor sometimes say use var, but other people like to put the explicit types, and so now you can change the way you like it, whether you want like var or explicit styles, or whether you like to put the this pointer in front of class variables. So that's just kind of minor things. Getting into some of the newer stuff that I really like. The first part of this is included in Visual Studio 2015 Update 2, which you saw the little black box that comes up when you run an application. The little black box is a kind of a debugging thing, and if you press the middle button, it turns on a feature where as you mouse over the different controls in your application, it puts the red highlight around it. If you select the right button as you move over the controls, it will show you lines where the padding and margins are located, kind of like those used to debugging in HTML. If you push the left button, up here, left button, inside of your Visual Studio window, it'll open up the live visual tree. And the live visual tree tells you exactly where that button is in the hierarchy of the visual components. And then if you click the little folder option next to the button that you want, it'll actually bring up the sources in your editor so that you can see exactly what's going on there. Now the part that happens with Visual Studio 15 that's not in the current version is you can make edits into your XAML and live edit and continue. So if you want to change the text, the colors, any of the stylings, you can do it right away, which is really cool. It's something that's been needed for years. And also they have the Live Property Explorer that you can go in and make any changes to any of the properties of your XAML, which is really nice because it tells you what the set properties are as well as inherited properties, so you can see where the things are coming from. So that is really cool. But like I said, I couldn't actually demonstrate it because I can't install it on my computer. We also pointed out some of the newer features as far as debugging goes that Todd shows. You can do conditions of various different sorts, as well as under the actions part of that debugging, you can actually put write lines to the console window inside your breakpoints, which is very, very handy. I don't know how many times you go in, put write lines, debug.writeLine into your code and then recompile and run it, or even edit and continue. But this doesn't even modify your code. You just put it on the breakpoint and you just write out whatever you want on there. Really handy. They're making a big effort of making the tooling for the XAML pages a lot better. So within the XAML pages, they'll have the light bulb features so that you can do operations like combine or eliminate the includes or the dependencies, the IntelliSense, so that you can have better complete as you type the character, the code in there. It's really, really nice. Another thing that they talked about which is kind of interesting to me, is it's not really related to Visual Studio 15, but they have a UWP Converter application, which takes your existing Win32 or .NET code and creates a project so that it creates an AppX application for you. So if you have an existing project called My App in a solution, then you run the command line converter, and it creates a .converter.project to it and add some additional information. It takes the information from your existing solution as well as from the MSI that creates. And when you do a build, it will actually create the myapp.appx, which AppX is like really cool. Like I said, if you have an AppX file, you can deploy it in the store. And so any of your regular Win32 apps that you don't, it's hard to distribute because there's not a store for non-store apps. Now there is, and so all of these existing applications you can make these AppX and distribute them easier that way. So I thought that was really cool. And you also can mix. So if you have your application that you want to gradually migrate to a full UWP application, you can mix parts of your application to have both and use this converter so that you can get it deployed sooner and not have to migrate the whole application all at once. Last thing that I thought was pretty cool is they have a per monitor DPI support for when your application is running. WPF and XAML apps, they have what's called a virtualized pixel size, which tries to keep it consistently sized depending on the DPI of your monitor. That works really well, except when you have multiple monitors and you move a window from one window to the other. You'll have it just right for one size, and then you move it over to a different monitor, and it's either too big or too small, and so they'll have a DPI support feature built right in. I thought that was pretty cool. And that's all I wanted to talk about. So thanks.
All right, so I'm going to be talking about Entity Framework Core, and you guys can all just go to sleep if you want, because at the very end, I'm going to share a resource. He has a GitHub repo that is his entire presentation with all of his demos and everything. Really impressive, and so I'm not bothering with any code examples or anything because he's already got all that packaged up for you. But I'll give you a quick look. So Entity Framework Core 1.0, first of all, what the heck is it? It used to be called Entity Framework 7, and they kind of started to realize, well, this is actually going to be different than Entity Framework 7 enough that we're going to rebrand it to Entity Framework Core, a lot like they kind of did with ASP.NET 5 is now being called .NET Core. It's multi-platform, so it'll run, when you write something with EF Core, you can run it on any platform, whereas Entity Framework 6 is not. It is the next iteration of Entity Framework as far as future support. It is, in that case, it is essentially EF7. They also, in order to keep it functional on multiple platforms, they do admit that some what they consider to be obscure or edge case features that exist in Entity Framework 6 will not be supported in EF Core ever. He didn't elaborate on what those were, but there will be some features that will just be permanently cut, but he seemed very confident they were very rare edge cases. And he also was very quick to assure anybody using Entity Framework 6 that the future lifespan of Entity Framework 6 is still very long. They're going to be continuing to provide updates and releases and extensive support for EF6. So it's not that we're all being left in the lurch yet. Give it a few years. So here's a little quick comparison. So EF6, as I mentioned, is Windows platform only. EF Core you would need to use if you want to write a multi-platform app. EF6 is not very extensible. One of the things that I was excited about with EF Core is every single piece in the Entity Framework pipeline is very easy to swap in and replace. You can inject your own dependencies for any single piece of an EF Core's functionality. EF6 is very mature. It's been built and mature. Entity Framework Core is still kind of very nascent. It's just in its beginnings. And so it's not as mature yet. They're coming out with a release candidate, and they're going to try to have this release candidate out as soon as possible, but they're also acknowledging this release candidate doesn't have everything that's on our roadmap, and it's functional and it's release ready for what's implemented, but there will be pieces in release 1 that just aren't there yet. So that's worth keeping in mind. As of the presentation, he acknowledged that the SQL generation in EF Core is, in his words, still pretty raw, and the link support, where Entity Framework 6 is very mature in its SQL generation and its link support is very robust. He said, again, quote, complex link queries are a little bit of a mystery right now in EF Core, but they feel that your general needs will run well in it. And as I mentioned, some features that are on the roadmap won't be in the initial release. So that being said, as I mentioned, Entity Framework 6 still has a long life cycle and long-term support, but the eventual vision and future for Entity Framework will be Entity Framework Core. And getting into kind of some of the things that were exciting about it, he made sure to point out that the performance demos he did were not cherry-picked for performance demo purposes, that he just basically put these together and ran them, and he wasn't trying to target something he knew was awesome. But every performance demo he did was consistently showing itself to be 10 times faster, if not more. And that's despite the SQL query being rather raw, and also not taking advantage of this next bullet point, where you can do things in batches. So it's going to be a much more performant one. And the big gain also coming along is batch support. With Entity Framework 6 and earlier, if you do two things on your context, like you update one entity and then you update another and then you do context.save changes, that always results in two SQL statements that are run separately. With EF Core, they've actually figured out, so if you do a bunch of things on your context before save changes, most of the time that'll still result in one SQL statement. That's their claim, what they've been talking about, they're excited about, which keeps the connections and the chattiness over the database down considerably. He did also want to point out, though, that all of his performance testing that showed 10 times faster was before leveraging that batching. And so even if you're not leveraging that batching at all, just the way it pipes things through from the database and builds its entities, et cetera, is considerably faster. And again, being very extensible and configurable, you can configure your batch size quite effectively as well. And then there's his GitHub repo. As I mentioned, I was going to be brief because he's got a lot more out there that's for you, including his PowerPoint slides, his code, example projects, and everything. So if anybody just wants to take a moment to capture that or write it down if you're interested, that GitHub repo has everything you'd need. You could completely re-present his entire presentation. So I think it's going to be neat. It's very, very performant. He showed a lot of cool things about it. It's a lot easier to work with in a lot of cases as well. So Entity Framework Core. Thanks. So who's next?
Yeah. So hello everyone, I'm Tom Maravilla, and I wanted to present on Bash on Ubuntu on Windows 10. So when they announced this, I got really excited because I'm old. In fact, I started developing in '98 and it was in C. And back then we had two big, huge monitors. One was for Windows for just email and Office, and the other was it was a terminal, HPUX, and that's where we did all of our development. We compiled everything through command line. We did everything command line. So I got to be very familiar with the VI editor, and for 13 years I used that. I mean, until we got into Java. I think maybe 6 to 8 years later, we started using Eclipse as an IDE, and everyone was, anyways, it's a long story. So I got really excited when they said they're bringing Bash to Windows, because usually when I install Windows, I usually install the Cygwin application, which allows Bash commands and Linux commands on Windows. And really what that is it recompiles the binaries and the Linux binaries into Win32. And on the other end, if you want to run Linux on your machine, you got to start up a virtual machine. And that has a lot of overhead to it as well. Hanselman explained in one of his videos that if he had an elevator approach for Bash on Ubuntu on Windows 10, he basically said you draw a line, you have Cygwin on one side, and you have a VM on the other, and Bash is pretty much in the middle. So why do we need this? I didn't sit with the team. I was kind of in the keynote. I was sitting with a bunch of other people I didn't know, and they kind of grumbled and were like, what, Bash, who cares? But more and more, especially not necessarily in the .NET side, but in the Java side, where I've spent most of my time, you work in a lot of different platforms. You work in Windows, and then you deploy to Linux or Unix or whatever, and you need to know how to get around. And I know for me, I learned a lot of shell scripting on how to make deployments and how to run things. And coming over to .NET, and everything is DOS based and everything, I lost a lot of that. I didn't take the time to go learn PowerShell because I just was too busy. But now I can, and through Siglin, I could do mostly what I wanted to do, writing shell scripts. So now I don't have to worry about that anymore. Bash is being put right into the kernel. It's not a Windows 32. It's not Windows 32 binaries, it's ELF binaries. And it'll allow at least me to work in a lot of different environments. So again, I didn't necessarily get this from the keynote. I tried to listen to a few of the sessions that they did on Bash at Build, but they did them in kind of the stage areas, and there were so many people around that you couldn't hear the presenter, which I thought was poorly planned. And so I went out later and watched a few videos. One was Hanselman presented. Actually, he did it at Build Conference, but he did it out in the entryway. And then they did an actual, I think it's a Code Academy presentation on it. So I watched both of those. And so basically they're calling it Windows Subsystem for Linux. And it's Ubuntu user mode that is on Windows through a partnership with Canonical. And again, this is not a virtual machine that's running in Windows, and it's not recompiled Linux binaries. It's the real deal. So I wanted to just show a quick demo. And I looked at installing the Insider Edition just to get access to this. I heard some horror stories from Jim about Rich's experience doing this. And I'm right in the middle of a big project right now, and I don't have time to fiddle with that. So I figured I would just show a quick video on them displaying it.
You can see that we're now sitting at a Unix command prompt. Now, LSB release just shows you what it is that we're running. We are running the trusty version of Ubuntu at this particular point in time. Once again, we grabbed this directly from Canonical. There's no changes made to their image. This is something that an end user can go download off their site today.
So real Linux user mode already running on top of Windows.
Real Linux user mode running on top of Windows. Now, everybody knows that you can do an LS. That's not terribly exciting. Everybody always asks us to do an LS in the proc directory, so we'll start with that. Just to have some fun, we will cat whack proc, whack CPU info. Wow. Genuine Intel, all sorts of goodness going on there. Now, I'm going to be clearing the screen every once in a while so people can hopefully see it a little bit better.
Absolutely.
Now, as we go through, let's actually prove that we're running an ELF binary at this particular point in time.
So ELF binaries are the binaries created by Linux's compiler toolset. It's the native executable format, essentially.
It is instead of
Linux
Win32, it's an ELF binary.
Right.
So let's just pick something. We'll pick uname out of the bin directory.
Cool.
And you can see that what we're doing here is we're actually running ELF64, and it thinks that it's on Unix.
Real Unix code.
Real Unix code. Now, some of the stuff that everybody always asks about this one. Mount C. First off, can I see my C drive?
Wait. So you're going to show us the Windows file system from within Linux running on Windows?
Yes. Yes. So,
Wow.
mount C dev. So I'm going into my dev directory.
Okay.
And you can see LS. There's everything.
Okay.
Right? So life there is good. Let's go into samples. Tab completion does work.
Nice.
See, and here I just have hello.c.
Okay.
Everybody knows hello world. This is something that everybody always starts with. Let's take a look at it in VI.
Wow, so there's Vi running on Linux, on Windows.
Yes.
I like this.
It's nice.
Let's do more of this.
So, we'll just quit out of this. We don't need to make any changes. It looks fine. And GCC hello.c-o hello.
So this is the GNU C compiler compiling C code in Linux on Windows.
Exactly. So let's run it real quick. We just compiled hello world.
So I'll leave it there. He beat that to death. Yeah. So how well does it work? I think if you need basic at this point, all the bash basic things you can do, the ls, the cat, the grep and awk and sed and all that, it's pretty stable. Where it gets a little dicey is when you really want to admin Windows through Linux, and I'm excited for it. I can't wait to get my hands on it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Alrighty, so like I said, I wanted to apologize to Alan. Let's see here, go back to
On WebEx, they're seeing the.
you should see everything now.
Perfect.
Good. All right. Yeah, so I overstepped his slide deck, so I apologize. Thank you, Alan, for recovering from that. So I had a chance to. It looks like I was the only ones that was interested in, or maybe perhaps interested in the Internet of Things with Windows 10. So I went to this particular class. Was kind of not really interesting. It was an open hack, so they had all the machines out there that had your own machine dual monitor with your own Raspberry Pi, and then they let you kind of just go for it. They had code examples, and you went out and did it. But what I wanted to show you guys, so first of all, if you go there to these sites, Windows 10 on for IoT, it's kind of a stripped down version of Windows 10, but it is technically Windows 10, so you can run all as we've said before, you can run all your universal Windows apps on this, and so you go and grab this. Microsoft's the IoT that they currently have. I did this just the other day, and I was kind of bummed out. I said, why couldn't I find the Windows 10 that I was looking for? And it was the current release build is not the same as their test builds that they're doing. So you want to get their latest and greatest build. So like for instance here, if you have original Pi 2, which I have here in my hands, is the Raspberry Pi 2 that I bought personally before I went to build, and I was like, oh sweet, now I can put Windows 10 on it. And then anyways, so that I bought a Wi-Fi adapter for it, and it is not supported in the current release build. But if you get like the latest things, the new wireless adapters do work. So
How much that cost?
this is $35. With the case and all the other things, it was a $50 thing. So, but they gave me the Wi-Fi adapter and an SD card and everything. So for $50, you get it. So this is Windows 10 running on my Raspberry Pi 2 from my house last night at 1:50 a.m. So you can see it's Gordo 2 network, everything. This is what you get when you output through the HDMI port here. This is what you connect up to your monitor, and that is what you see when you hook it up. So at this point, what you would do is you go in and you create your project, your XAML projects. They also have another kind of a headless display here. There's the local network, port 8080. And these are the kind of things that you were getting before. And the release candidate, the one that I was talking about, only had two options. But now they give you all these different things like change your device names, change your things. If you have Wi-Fi adapters, you can hook everything up here. They have, and it's really hard to see, and I apologize, but you have performance. You've got a task manager. It shows you all your running tasks, all the processes that are going. You can load in applications, your own apps, and then they can just stay in there. So it's like a directory of all your apps that you want, and you can pick that as like your default app to run as it comes up, or you can switch over to new apps and whatnot. I thought it was kind of cool that they'd thrown in all this performance monitoring and whatnot. So just to give you a quick, for anybody who hasn't seen like the Raspberry Pi, this is just kind of a board layout. You have all these breakouts here as your general purpose I/O pins. One of the things that I thought was really cool about, first of all, the Raspberry Pi, I was trying to get into embedded programming. I was looking at different kind of things. I picked up a NetDuino, Arduino. I've looked at other Lua development board that's on a little tiny Wi-Fi chip. All these are cool and interesting, but I really like the Raspberry Pi because it's the full computer. It's everything you need. With other things, you'd have to do sound drivers and video drivers, and with this, you've got it all set. So, so this is really cool. So what they did in the class was be able to have this little shield that you put over the top, and it had a couple sensors and whatnot, and they had you run that. But what they do is, so I was showing you when you hook up to the HDMI port, you get your screen, and that's where your app can live. So you do XAML. They did an example of your Windows app with XAML. You put up your controls on there, and you have access to call into your general purpose I/O, all your temperature sensors, anything that you want, and be able to display that stuff. So that's what gets outputted out to your HDMI port. Then you can always SSH in. You can do you can terminal in, and you can get all your debug statements, anything that you need through that. But I thought it was really impressive, and I also thought it was really impressive that you could do live debugging through Visual Studio on your Raspberry Pi. I thought that was pretty impressive, because I'm thinking of, what did I do before? I compiled it, threw it on this chip, and you're like, ooh, all right, so let's see what we can do, output anything through terminal. So it was pretty cool. One of the things also that was interesting is they showed a demo of this. You guys can look at this. Was the closed loop control. So what was cool about this demo was, what they want you to do is to be able to take your Raspberry Pi and have it be headless, right? So you have no screen, no nothing, but then output what you would want from the screen to another device. Like here they have a tablet. So what this demo was, and I won't show you for time, but basically they had the tablet that tapped into the local accelerometer, everything like that, so you could move things, and then it would move the motor on the Raspberry Pi accordingly. So the idea was showing that you had external sensors that you could pump down to your Raspberry Pi and then control local loads through that. And that was pretty, I thought that's pretty impressive and all built on Windows and all familiar. And that's another big, huge plus. They have other things too that you can run Node. You can run Node on those too. It doesn't really matter. So one other thing before I do that, we go switch over. I have two of them, so forgive me if you're tired of listening to me already. But one of the other things they talked about with IoT devices, currently there's lots of different stacks and different development environments and whatnot. And so if you have a project, you build a little small prototype board, you build a little bit more, 20 more boards or whatever, and eventually you build out to full production and whatnot. And they say, and you got to go through retooling, you got to do all these different things. One of the things they're going to help you with is, since it's Windows 10 straight through and through, you don't have to retool. Your prototype boards run the same code that your production boards run, everything straight through. And they even have services to say, oh, well, we can help you with the hardware too. It's all basically the same core hardware. So it's really going to help make things faster for the Internet of Things. The question is, what are we going to do with it? And that I don't know. I'm still stuck at trying to figure out what a good project would be for me. But there you go. Right, some sort of device that they can send their home teaching right then and there. Click, I did it. I did it. The other thing too is they also mentioned how easy it was to set up with Raspberry Pi hooked up to Azure and all the cloud services. Since it's Windows 10, all those things, all those libraries are available to you, which is pretty amazing. So if you say, well, I don't want to store the stuff here on the local device, I'll send it all up to the cloud, to Azure, and really anything. So that's what makes device work so much easier now that all basically Windows is there for us. So, all right, so that was that. Now we're going on to ASP.NET Core 1.0. By the way, if you guys, everybody should go see that session. If you didn't go see the session while you're there, or you're listening or watching this later, you got to watch the Scott Hanselman and Scott Hunter presentation on this. This was actually the highlight for me. I was like, they were the best presenters there. So one of the things they mentioned, and Alan talked about it, was that they were trying to show how Visual Studio 15 can be installed really quickly, and they installed it right at the beginning of the demo too. They said, what we want to do is we want to engage everybody. Well, I don't want to go to a school and tell a student, hey, you guys, you should really get into this program. It's awesome. And they're like, now go download this 2 gig ISO, restart 6 or 7 times, tweak some things, and you'll be right into it. They said, we'd rather just get you started, so within 1.5 minutes, they're up, they're ready to go, and they can start coding. And so that gets you into like the ASP.NET Core 1.0. And so this was from their slides, is saying you still have ASP.NET 4.6. It's all in the framework. Core 1.0 can use those things and can sit on top of that. But let's see. Hey, what happened? There we go. So what they have, the new stuff now over there is you have the straight .NET Core libraries. Everything over there on the right-hand side is open source, and they're going to kind of keep those things in parallel. So you can go down the path of ASP.NET Core 1.0 if you'd like with the current framework, or switch over to multi-platform and use the core libraries like that. One of the things they also pointed out in that demo was, so they did a ASP.NET Core 1.0 web page, and it's just a simple entry point main method that basically said, yeah, I'm a site, I'm a web page, and it spits out hello world, right? That's all it did. He says very simple, doesn't have any extra stuff, but they wanted to show you how modular it could be, .NET Core. So they said, great, let's do the performance on it. Right now, Visual Studio, ASP.NET can serve up like 246,000 requests a second. Node was at like 600,000 requests per second. They're like, man, we can do better than that, right? And so they ran their benchmarks, and they did 3.4 million requests per second with this new ASP.NET Core. That was very simple. That's what they're saying. They're like, there's no frills in this. This thing, you hit it, it says hello. That's it, but it can do that 3.4 million times a second. So it's amazing. And then they said, well, what if we want to do extra stuff? What if we want to serve up a static web file? They're like, you just take your module and you say, I'd like to use static web files now. Boop, it's a module you get that you download through NuGet or whatever, and you say, there you go. So you just throw on everything you need. You want an error page, you throw that in. And everything is just wired up with, you got the package, you say, I'd like to use this package now in the code. So I think that's pretty impressive, that you can do whatever you want. You can, for instance, like in the enterprise, we could have a default error page that we want to do. And that's just a package that you can pull down and it's ready to go. Let's see here. So yeah, so just reiterating, they mentioned that. I said, well, ASP.NET 5 is not 5, it's now Core 1.0, but totally modular, seamless transition to the cloud, open source, everything they like about it, and it's fast. So that was their highlights on this. One of the things, also they got rid of the .cs proj file. It's now project.json. One of the other things I mentioned was adding features to, say, your URL, like you want this particular part of your site just needs to be as fast as possible. So you strip everything out and just give them what they need. And then other parts of even inside other URLs that you can give the full ASP.NET stack and give everything you need, all the features that you want. So that makes it really modular and as they say, fast. Whenever they need performance, you can do that. And one of the other interesting things they showed was they're like, yeah, look at our razor syntax that we have here, right? They're like, we thought that was pretty cool, and personally I liked it, but they said, yeah, it's looking a little less like HTML, and so now they're able to change that into that, which is they're using different things like ASP-controller as attributes on the HTML, and that's kind of your razor syntax now is going to be in these attributes. So it's now looking more like HTML, and it can do that. So I thought that was pretty slick. I don't know if I can't remember if we talked about it, but they had lots of more support for Bower and NPN. They have task runners for Gulp, whatnot. I think that's probably not new stuff, but that was in their presentation. One that I thought was dang impressive too was like the Raspberry Pi remote debugging into a Linux container. You'd be able to have your Docker image with Linux, and you can remote debug into that and find out exactly what's going on Linux, and I think that's amazing. Also, command lines, you can compile .NET through the command line, create new projects, all from the command line if that's your thing. Not my thing, I'm more of a visual guy. But that's about it. Yeah.
I've recycled some slides from another presentation we did. Okay. Today I'm going to talk about, as quickly as I can, some more things, extending what Gordon talked about with ASP.NET Core, and then I'll dive into a little bit of the demo of what you can do with bots, what bots are, use cases, that kind of stuff. 5 minutes really isn't enough, but we'll get where we can get. So as far as ASP.NET Core, Gordon nailed it. I don't really need to do much here, but these are the slides that you've already seen, so that is way awesome. And the only other thing I wanted to point out is that at Build, Microsoft tried out a new session style where they had code labs, where they had 108 seats with a presenter or a lab instructor that would walk you through doing a bunch of code labs, and they had them on seven different types of subjects. IoT was one, ASP.NET Core was one, Unity Gaming was another. There were a whole bunch of them. The problem with that is there were like 40,000 people at Build. No, there was 40. It's totally 40. And they all wanted to go to all of those labs at the same time. And so their solution was to hand out tickets like some kind of carnival. So that you had to come back and hand them your ticket so you could go to the session. So it was very difficult to get in. I was lucky to get into the middle two of these for ASP.NET Core. And depending on who your presenter or who your lab instructor was, you may have had a really good or not experience. For the module 2, I had John Galloway, who's a pretty big deal with ASP.NET. If he's on the community stand-up every week, and he kind of knows what he's talking about, and he's easy to listen to. And so that was really helpful. The reason I bring these slides up is that even more helpful is that all of these labs, not just the ASP.NET Core ones, but all of them are posted out on GitHub, and you can go play with them at your leisure, which is, to me, a lot more instructive than having to try to race people through the steps and have somebody bugging you every 3 seconds, like, how'd you do that? So this is way better. Just to drill into these a little bit, some of the things that the labs will teach you are right here. You create a website via ASP.NET Core 1.0 template. That's basically file new project. You've seen this, but when you choose web, you get like all the parade of little web types of applications that you can create under the general heading of ASP.NET 4.6, and then there's a little row at the bottom for what used to be 5 is now Core 1.0 for blank web application and web API. So that's what that template is. You walk through some of the core components of an app. You create a create, read, update, delete app, CRUD app. And you have a unit test, and then I think you run one in Ubuntu. I don't think anybody got that far in the session I went to. Actually, I didn't go to that session, so who knows? Maybe they did. I went to this one. You work with static files, routing. John Galloway walked us through the utility of writing custom middleware, and we talked about identity, which is cool. This one was good, or it could have been. Had the execution been better, but the content is really good, and I highly recommend going and looking at the lab. You can deploy stuff to Azure. And the last one is more front-end focused, working with single-page apps on Angular 2, leveraging a lot of the tool sets, playing around with Manifold.js and Vorlon.js for compliance, that kind of stuff. All right. Was that on there? I don't, yeah. Okay. I bet they use TypeScript. I didn't go to number 4, but I still plan on doing the lab. Here's the links to those. Again, Jim already had these, I think. But that second link right there, if you just go to Code Labs, or actually just that second link, GitHub Microsoft-Build 2016, that has all the different kinds of labs, not just ASP.NET. So let's talk a little bit about bots. Microsoft, what they've done is they have this bot framework that's a Microsoft operated service, and they call it the bot connector. And I'll show you that slide in a second. And it's also an SDK. You download the SDK, and that gives you a new choice when you go to file new project, and I'll show you that later too. But the point is you probably use a whole bunch of different types of service. To make a file new project, hello world bot, you don't need to do anything but download the SDK, and you can have a little bot that will echo things that you type. That's the hello world bot, which is cool. But if you want to do more stuff, then there's probably a whole bunch of other things that you might include, back on that other slide, like language understanding intelligence service, which is Lewis, speech APIs, Azure, and bot connector channels into things like Slack and Skype and lots of other things, or even just APIs, web services, public APIs, web services that sit out on the internet. So drilling down from, they said 100,000 to 10,000 feet, what a bot is, they kind of talk about the logic, the core logic of the bot is something that already exists. It's not something that Microsoft does, that's something that you do. And it may connect to a web service. And for the most part, a very simple bot, you could write your own conversation logic. It's not that hard. But what happens is when you want to start preserving state, when you want to start managing all of the conversation state in a complex conversation and do things like authentication and have multiple steps and filling out forms, all that kind of stuff, it gets really hard to manage really fast. So that's why they add this Bot Builder SDK, which basically does a lot of the plumbing for that for you. It makes it a lot easier to do. You can focus more on your business logic. And then if you want to hook into things that are smart, like language user intelligence, or language, I always say user, language understanding intelligence service, it makes it drop dead easy. And I'll demo that. This other slide here is just to show you that even with all the stuff that we've already presented, it doesn't really talk to anything until you hook it up to the bot connector. And the bot connector lets you do things like translation, storing state, sending and receiving messages, and then you implement one REST API on your bot, and then it can talk to all these things on the right-hand side. So it is. That's not the whole list. That's not exhaustive. That's what fits on the slide. So this is when you do File New Project, after you've installed the Bot Framework SDK, you get this choice, Bot Application. And you say, okay, and name it something, and then you can run it. It's not all that, there's not a lot going on when you run it. It's just a little, there's a little web page that pops up. Then you need another utility called the, I'll show you what it is. It's like the bot test utility that actually connects to your running. It's not that. It's not botulator. We should call it that. That's not what it's called. Anyway, okay, so I'm going to go into this demo really quick. Hopefully you can see this. And I'll have to slide this over. Whoops. All the way over. Do you see that? But it's tiny. Big. Okay. So here's Visual Studio. I've already built this. I would highly recommend the session that walks you through the steps that it takes to build this. And this isn't the whole thing, but this is kind of the part where it's smart enough to talk to the language understanding intelligence service. And eventually when that's done its thing, it'll pop up this nearly pointless web page, wherever it went. There, it pops that guy up. So that's how you know it's running. And then you have to run the bot framework emulator. That's that guy. I'll put him over on your screen too. So that's this. And so what this does is it communicates with your bot, and you can do things. There's in the video they explain there's like user messages and system messages. It pre-cans some of these system messages, so I can say, okay, a bot has been added to the conversation. It sends that message, and it eventually responds to that. And so that's the canned message that it comes with, and you highlight that message, and it can show you the JSON that depicts all the pieces and parts of that message. And then if you want to do things like, who knows what that ticker symbol is? Anyone? It's the load balancer we use at the church, F5. Okay, give me a ticker symbol.
F4, FF4.
Yeah, I know, F5. You know, hey, it's NASDAQ, right? That you get what you get. It's the closest they could have. So yeah, throw out a ticker symbol.
MSFD.
Oh, that's imaginative. How you want me to ask for it? You could probably fool me.
How much is at Microsoft? MSFD.
This one might not work. see if it. The cool part about that is if it doesn't work, you can go back to your Lewis integration, and yeah, it's confused. We probably broke my bot, and you can train it. It keeps the track. Oh, Skynet is real. Run. No. So I could show you the Lewis stuff. I'll leave that as an exercise. I think I'm extending my time, but it's pretty cool how you do that. You go in and you can just tell it, teach it, and train it, and pick out what things matter, and say, oh yeah, that MSFT, that's the ticker symbol. Anyway, so that's bots and ASP.NET.
Great. So at the end of build, John, Alan, and I attended the hackathon. It's one of the more exciting pieces of the conference, and if you haven't tried and attended one, you should. It's really fun. They have a lot of Microsoft support. They have a lot of on-site members that really want you to use their technology. They had representatives from the Cortana team, the machine learning team, like the 3D printing team, the top-tier development support team are all there to help you with your programs throughout the 24-hour hackathon period. John had the idea of doing something more interesting when he's on his treadmill with his Microsoft Band. So we were going to integrate the band with Unity so he'd have something to see and something to do while he's on his treadmill, aside from maybe watching Netflix.
Do you have a band that you can show people?
Version 2 band. Very nice. There's a version 1 around here as well. So the technology we use were the Microsoft Band SDK, and we use the band as the game controller and also to get the health stats. One thing we haven't talked about today is the UWP apps in Windows 10 can use any like Xbox One, Xbox 360. I'd assume any USB controller in any UWP app. That's like a supported native keyboard mouse interface now. At least they're making the claim, so they're going to have to support it. To get the multiplayer element, Alan coded up a SignalR component and pushed out the data to Azure. And then John integrated with Unity, and I did the band SDK. So here's a couple slides on the band. We have a lot of sensors to play with. A couple of them they've disabled, like the GPS, they don't give us access to. We suspect it's for security or privacy reasons. But a lot of great sensors. It's a good device. Talk Bluetooth to it. The API is really good for communicating with cross-platform. So yeah, the band is good. Some of the things we learned were the accelerometer and gyroscope will flood you with data. Over Bluetooth, we're tons of data, and it's a little overwhelming. And if you've ever used like a Wiimote or something where you have to set it on a table, that's pretty important, but we didn't want to go through the hassle, so trying to get around the baseline calibration stage is tricky. We were kind of hoping for a gesture API to maybe be built in so that if you wanted to like push a jogger over or like throw a football at a bird while you're jogging, that would be for us, but that doesn't exist, and creating it's actually going to be challenging. So if anybody's out there ready for a challenge, make a gesture API for the band. We also ran into some challenges with multiple people using TFS and Unity. It doesn't integrate smooth, and you'll get some build errors. And even the top tier Microsoft Dev support were a little stifled with some of which files to check in from Unity and have everything be seamless.
And that'll be better when Microsoft buys Unity, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Or when Unity buys Microsoft.
Yeah. We did get swag. We got nice neck pillows, memory foam with hoodies built in, and now that's my favorite piece of swag ever. We learned that if you have an Adobe ID right now, you can use Maximo, get models if you wanted to download the assets and plug them into Unity models. It's in fact, the winner of the game component used the Maximo models in their hackathon entry, and it worked out really well. So here's John's demo.
So everything that we used in our game, all the artwork assets, are all from the asset store. They're all free, which is really awesome. Let's get this started.
You'll need to share your screen again, though.
Okay. Okay, I gotta pair my band with the computer really quick, so Bluetooth. Sorry, this will take just a second. If you guys see John's band, let me know. There it is. So I'll pair that. Sorry, just waiting for it to pair. Okay, so it's paired. And so here's our app. So I'm going to go ahead and start the band up. So that connects to the band. And so now it's listening to what's happening on the band. And so we'll start our workout. So we're using the band to move us through the 3D world. And to, so I'm going to start walking. And it's also collecting telemetry from the band, like the distance and the speed and my heart rate. So let's see if it starts reading. There we go. Now it's starting to read. Where are you at?
I don't know. Can't see you.
Oh, we're on top of each other. Or where are you?
I thought I was on 40. Oh yeah, you're in front of me.
Okay, why don't you go in front of me? I'll stop walking for a second. So we're sending our position up to Azure using Signal R. So we should be able to see each other. He should buzz past me here in a second. There he is. There he is. So I should be able to start going and catch up to him maybe.
I'm gonna run fast.
So. Yeah, so you got some cows and some image effects and sun flares and stuff. So, but all these assets were free from the asset store, and it was pretty fun to implement this. But it's about a half-mile course, but we aren't going to go the whole half mile.
So John, are you guys paired to the same laptop, or are you guys on two different machines?
Two different machines. So he's on his machine here, and I'm on my machine, and we're communicating up through Azure. So.
Yeah.
So he could be at his house.
Yeah, he could be playing this at his house, and I could be at my house on my treadmill, but we're running together in the same world. And we could have as many people as you could have 20 people up there all running in the same world. So right now there's no limit, except for, I guess there's probably some theoretical limit, but so. Did you run past me?
Yeah, I ran past you. There I am. You automatically stay on the track? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the track is pre-scripted. So we have a waypoint system that we created to tell the player where they should run.
You gotta get to the lake.
I don't think you stay on the track.
You're going too fast. There's a bug if you go too fast, you start going in circles. So. But I ran like 2 miles of this the other night. It was a lot of fun. So.
Yeah, how did you make it so performant?
So there's a lot of things in Unity that you can do to make your. It's a bug. So like if you stop walking for a while, you'll catch the waypoint again, and you can start going again. You went too fast. So like in Unity to make trains like performant, you have to do a lot with the textures and downsize them a lot. So we learned a lot about that in this process. So. Go. There you go.
So you run into it?
No, you turn. So.
You need to do a triathlon then, so you can get in there and
that'd be
switch to
cool.
a bike and then go swimming.
You have to put the band on your ankle when you're doing the bike.
Anyways, that's really all we have to show. But